another episode of Fully Booked. I'm Megan.
And I'm Shireen.
And we are still in the middle of our spooky season coverage over here on the podcast. Also on our website at fullybooked.ca, so you guys can head over there if you want to check out everything that our team of contributors is covering for the month of October when we're talking about everything occult.
There's some good stuff on there this month.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So, again, I find, you know what, like, it's just releases at, like, the right time this year, I guess, for us to kind of do an episode about them. Have you noticed we've done this, like, a few times, like, new films?
We've done a pretty good job with this year.
Yeah, I know.
And it was totally unintentional most of the time.
But the majority of the time, I would say, while we were planning, we didn't necessarily consider specific releases of film. But you know what? Hey, here we are. And it is, I guess, logically, it's the month of October, which means you get some spooky releases in October, which makes sense. And one of the latest ones to show up on everybody's radar is the latest adaptation of Stephen King's 1975 novel, Salem's Lot. Which was his foray into the world of vampires, basically.
Which I did not know before watching this movie.
Oh my God, she was so cute. We were sitting down watching and she's like, what's it about? I'm like, vampires. And she was like, okay.
I thought it was about a cat.
Oh my God, you're so funny.
But that's
Pet Sematary. I think you're confusing your King lore, which is like not hard because a lot of them were published in the same 10 to 15 year period.
Yeah, and like all throughout this movie, I was expecting something to do with it to happen or something.
Yeah, I don't think there's much reference in this one to it or anything like to do with dairy specifically. Anyway, yeah, no, not really. So yeah, for anyone who's I guess unaware, possibly, HBO Max just dropped an adaptation on I believe October 3rd of Stephen King's novel, and this is actually the second adaptation that's been done of this work. I believe in the late 1970s or early 1980s there was what I'm pretty sure is a miniseries that's actually fairly highly regarded.
I was going to say,
yeah,
it's quite well liked.
I haven't gotten around. I've only seen bits and pieces of it over time. I really have to sit down and watch the whole thing because my understanding is that it's actually quite good and a lot of people really like that adaptation of it. So I would be curious to check that out. So anyway, we're gonna talk a little bit about that and kind of get into this kind of like more modern adaptation. This film reminded me of another more modern adaptation of a Stephen King property that I found also was very, like, a lot of the reviews have kind of said the same thing as my understanding. It's sort of very middle of the road, kind of lackluster to a degree, doesn't really do anything interesting with the story. And I kind of say I have to agree. We sat down and watched it last night and I didn't come away from it with any sort of like new, like, oh wow, like that was really cool because of this, that, or the other.
She wasn't overly impressed.
I wasn't. No. And I don't know if I'm the only one or not. I don't know what your feelings about this are, but I felt like you weren't incredibly enthused while we were watching it either.
No, like I wasn't really sure. Like obviously I went into it blind.
Yeah.
I haven't read the book. But for example, when I watched it, the newer adaptation of it, I really enjoyed that one.
Particularly the first part. And I know most people prefer the first part. I get it. The second part's too long, I think, is what its biggest problem is.
Yeah, and like I'm not like your most horror movie buff. Like I like a good campy thrasher. But this one was... It was kind of like, like it had...
There's nothing to take away from it,
yeah,
I guess.
like there were like elements where I was hopeful that we were going in a direction with it. You know, kind of like with the opening scene, you know, with the character who was played by formerly Euron Greyjoy there, that actor.
Oh, yes. Straker is the name of the character.
And I was like, ooh, it kind of, like, I'm not sure where we're going with this. Like, what's gonna happen, you know? And I was getting, like, vibes of, like, I don't know if you remember this movie, The Vampire's Assistant, Cirque du Freak.
Oh gosh, yeah. Some of the atmosphere and the lighting in certain scenes, I think, really lend themselves to that. I do remember that. I read a couple of those books when I was younger.
Me
those
too.
Ones, yeah.
Yeah. So I was getting like that vibe, and I'm like, ooh, are we going like circus with
like
this
super
one?
campy with it?
Yeah. But then it just kind of kept falling short everywhere. Like I think that's where it was like going one way, and then it was like, aw, and then it was going another way, and then it was like, aw.
Yeah, you kept on kind of being maybe like, oh, maybe they'll do this with it. Oh, no, never mind.
No,
maybe it'll lean more this way. Oh, no, never mind. You know, and it takes kind of a lot of turns that way. But I think in the end, considering that I don't know all the specifics, but this adaptation and like languished in like production hell of some kind for a very long time before they actually made it, and then like the premiere date kept changing, and is it getting a theatrical release, is it getting a streaming release? There was all kinds of back and forth about it. I think it is getting a limited maybe theatrical release in a week or two, actually. I think it's supposed to. Yeah, I know. I don't know.
Seems a little backwards.
I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, and so I think that, I guess, like, unfortunately, because of that, it probably built, like, a fair amount of anticipation that people could have had for the project. And I think overall the majority of people, particularly fans of the book and maybe fans of the original miniseries as well, would more than likely agree that it fell short. Possibly even people who are fans of vampire fiction in general. Yeah, might believe that it kind of fell short. Because right now I can tell you at the time of recording, it's sitting at a 5.8 out of 10 on IMDb and 48% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, like, I feel like the Rotten Tomatoes score is being a little harsh, but I think it's because of what exactly you just said. Like, of the forums that I've read online, a lot of people are hating on this because they were big fans of the book.
Yes.
And the miniseries.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's unfortunately, because it's also one of Stephen King's more well-known novels as well, and it is real. I've not read everything. Obviously, I've read like maybe like 6 or 7 of his books, but I feel like the majority of them don't get into. They do have a tendency to kind of, he does create his own lore and his own creatures quite a bit, and so getting into a classic like vampire type of story has probably made it that this novel is very highly regarded, and also because of the atmosphere that the novel creates, the tension that it creates, and a lot of the interactions between the characters, and which is obviously a big signature thing for him, but obviously another exploration of a small town and the attitude towards certain things and the way that certain incidents will be treated in a small town versus maybe in a larger city, what you would get,
Yeah, well, I think that's a good point, right? Like, Stephen King is known for creating his own monsters.
Agreed.
And so for him to dive into, like, a vampire story, there's a lot weighing on it. Like, there's a lot of expectation on it. Like, ooh, what's he gonna do with a vampire? Like, is he gonna go, typical lore? Is he gonna go, obviously you wouldn't go Twilight vampire, but
I mean, no.
Which would be hilarious.
Oh god, that would be so
funny. But like, yeah, I think that there was a lot, because as soon as you said it's vampires, I was like, ooh, interesting. Like, Stephen King vampires? All right, let's do this,
It's so interesting for someone who's considered such a master of the genre that he very rarely ventures into that very classic monster, like your like universal type monster like, story.
I doubt he's had like a werewolf story.
Not that I can. Oh no, he has. Oh, that's not true. Like shorter stories and stuff like that. But yeah, no, he has. But see, I find he's done a lot more of that with like his shorter fiction. I forget what the name of the actual story is, but there's a movie adaptation called Silver Bullet.
Okay.
Which was like mid-'80s. Corey Haim was in it, and stuff. And it's not a great film, but that one's a werewolf story, which is not bad. I don't hate the movie. Like, it's not like, it's like, very campy, very 80s, but I don't hate the film. It's not terrible, honestly. Yeah. It's kind of fun.
Like, I feel like if they had done this one in the 80s, we would be a lot more forgiving towards it. I think
so. And I'm sure that that's partially the case with that miniseries, too, is that it's like a faithful adaptation that maybe also, like, suited the time period.
Right.
So, I mean, the novel, like I said, was published in 1975, and it's set basically at that time as well. And this film adaptation, they did not modernize it. They kept it in that time period as well. Which, I mean, like, yeah, it looks fun to a degree, but it also, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's because of, I don't know if it was because of maybe the actors to a degree or the writing potentially, but other than, like, like they really tried to hammer it home, with the vintage cars and with the costumes and the hairstyles and, and like all of those aspects. And I don't know if it was because of maybe the dialogue or the way that the movie is filmed or something, but nothing about it felt very 70s to me. Like, I didn't genuinely feel we were in that time period when we watched it.
Like, this is my point, right? Like, even when it was focused on, like, the kids.
Yes.
I said to you, I'm like, is this a flashback or is this happening right now?
Yeah, you asked right at the beginning. There was a scene with some bullies and stuff at the school, and you were like, hang on. You were like, I'm confused. Is this happening right now?
Well, I was more convinced about the kids being in the 70s than I was about anybody else, you know? And then that's why I kept thinking, oh, are we going to go, like, the route of, like, It with the kids, you know? Are we going to do, like, the lighthearted, like, kind of funny way?
Yeah.
But no, they didn't do that either.
I don't think that the writing was strong enough for that. Yeah. And I wouldn't necessarily, it's not like I would, like, totally fault the cast for this, obviously. I feel like, you know, this was kind of an all sort of encompassing production in that way. But it was sort of the combination of all of those things didn't wind up working very well. So essentially, just basic overview. We don't need to go through like every plot point of the film, but basic overview is that the story is set in a fictional small town in Maine. Surprise, surprise! Called Salems-lot. But it's become the sign that's like, you know, sort of at the entrance to town, which you see a lot, especially in the States. That's a big thing. We don't have that as much in Canada. We have it, but we don't have it quite in the same way.
Well, it's not as symbolic, I feel.
No, agreed. Yeah. When you know, like when you drive into town, they'll be like, you know, welcome to Jerusalem's lot, established whatever year, population la-di-da, et cetera. It's a small town, and the sign at the entrance to the town, the beginning of the word Jerusalem has been kind of like, you know, faded due to weather and whatnot over time and use, or whatever, it's worn out. So what you can really see is that it says Salem's lot, because the majority of the beginning of that word has kind of disappeared over time. So it's sort of a running thing in town that everyone calls it Salem's lot, which is where obviously the title of the book comes from. A young writer named Ben Mears has returned to town after a number of years away. His parents passed away and he moved.
Oh, yeah, and I didn't like that they didn't explore that background very much.
They didn't talk about it very much, and there's a little more to it in the book as well. But anyway, he moves back to town. He's working on a novel and doing kind of like some self-exploration. But again, it's very surface level in the movie. You don't really get into it very much. And at the same time that this is happening, there is a very old house up on the hill. There's always a house up on a hill in town called the Marston House, which was previously owned by a Mr. Marston like decades prior, and I believe I think he murdered his whole family or something. There's a lot of lore there that has been purchased by some very ambiguous European investor types, essentially a Mr. Straker and a Mr. Barlow, who have recently arrived in town and have opened an antique furniture shop in town. No, everyone, of course, is very, a little bit, like, you know, very curious about this and very drawn to the idea of it because this is a very small town in a small state in the grand scheme of things. It's not like Maine is like a massive state per se.
It is to Stephen King.
It is, yeah. You can do a lot with it. You know, having these like, you know, like these sort of like fancy bougie Europeans show up is a very odd thing for this very small sort of blue collar town. Yep. They don't often have newcomers and things, so people are
everybody knows everybody, because I think it said that there's like 1,200
odd people living there. Yeah, that's it. You know, so it's kind of, I don't know. It's very new and exciting to have this happening, essentially. And it's also quite mysterious. You know, Mr. Straker is around. He's the one who's setting up the business, opening things, but no one has seen Mr. Barlow anywhere and has any idea where he is or what he's doing, basically. And so as some very interesting things begin to happen in the town, children start disappearing, followed by adults, essentially. Ben, as well as some of the other people throughout the town, you know, a teacher named Matt Burke, one of the younger students who's also a more recent arrival in town named Mark, start to realize that there's maybe more going on with these new arrivals than people would have previously anticipated, and possibly something more sinister is happening. You know, that's kind of your overview.
And if Mark hadn't been in the story, then this would have really been a flop.
Yeah, agreed. God, I agree with you. The kid who plays Mark is so good. Yeah. He was great. I'm gonna look up his name because I don't know what it is. He was really good. Jordan Preston Carter plays Mark Petrie in the film, and he was wonderful. He really carried a lot of it. I will say, in spite of the fact that, you know, there's like a pretty decent cast in this movie. Again, it just felt like it was very it was just very middle of the road. The novel, I felt anyway, when I read it, which was, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago maybe, it's very atmospheric in the type of tension that it builds, because we don't give, again, like, because it's written, and maybe that's part of the problem with adapting things into a film, is that they don't give away the entire story within the first, 10, 12 minutes.
Yeah, which they did, right?
Yeah, and like, it's immediately like, you're in a vampire movie and we're just letting you know you're in a vampire movie. Whereas there's a lot more mystery within throughout the course of the novel. There's a lot more that goes into like the different characters realizing, oh, that's a little off. Oh, that's a little weird, and then obviously the children start to disappear as well, which adds another level of tension to things. But the novel has a lot more atmosphere to it. There's a lot more of like, not completely like a gothic sensibility to it, but there is like a much darker atmosphere that is created.
Yeah, I mean, like, the whole aspect of the kids, who then turned into vampires and then were coming after Mark, to be like, come with us, It was very, again, what was that movie? Was it like The Little Vampire or something?
Oh, God, I forgot about that movie.
Which one I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like, I was watching it and I'm like, again, like, this is... I don't know which direction we're going in.
Are we going
with the
funny?
tone.
Are we going serious?
Yeah.
It's like it couldn't quite make up its mind. Yeah. And I don't know, some of the dialogue felt very stilted.
It was,
and we were all kind of commenting when we were watching it yesterday that not as much like the lead actors, I would say. Most of them, well, it was also like like I said, a pretty decent cast. So most people like they did what they could with what they were given, like Ben's played by Lewis Pullman, who I think was in the latest Top Gun movie.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, he was. And he's Bill Pullman's son, anyway, for anybody.
That's why he looks familiar.
Yeah.
Because he, rocked into the movie, and I'm like, oh, him. And I'm like, who is that?
Who is that? That's Bill Pullman's son. So,
that makes so much sense.
The dad from Casper, and from While You Were Sleeping, and from, like, Independence Day, like, a ton of different stuff.
Yeah, because remember, I was like, oh, this guy.
Yes.
And then after,
I was like, how do you know who that is?
As soon as I said it, I'm like, I actually have no idea who that is.
Because he looks like his dad.
Yeah.
That's why you recognized him. That's funny though that you have that reaction.
Funny, eh?
So he does what he can with what he's given. He's not really given very much to do for a lead character in a film.
He
honestly,
really isn't. He's a little wimpy.
Yeah, and he's not given much to work with in the sense that they don't give him much in terms of like a character exploration
or anything. Yeah,
not at all. No. That's it. It does wind up being Mark Petrie who carries like so much of it, and I would say kind of Matt to a certain extent as well, the teacher at the school. He's one of the primary school teachers that where Mark goes to school. He's like your exposition dumper.
Well, him and Mark.
Yes. Because Mark's thing, right, is that he's really into old horror stuff from like the 30s and 40s. So he's really into like Universal monsters.
He figures it out right away.
And he has horror comic books and stuff all over his room. And we were in the middle of watching this movie last night, and Shireen's husband immediately goes, "Is it just me or is this kid really fucking cool?" And I was like, yes. Yes, he is.
Yes, he is.
This is how he wants your kid to come out.
Well, he gets what he gets, okay?
You're gonna have to deal with it.
Yeah, she will be who she will be.
If she likes princesses and ponies, I'm just gonna need you to deal with it.
Exactly. You will play ponies and princesses with her, okay? Okay.
Oh gosh. Anyway, so as this happens, that's it. And Matt, because of, just sort of bothering to pick up a book at all as a teacher, I guess he's one of the only people in this town who reads books, also is able to put two and two together.
But they do it so quickly.
It's very ham-fisted. It's very, immediately like, this is definitely a vampire.
Yeah.
And this is what vampires are immune to, and this is what hurts them. And you're like, oh, okay. It's the dialogue. The dialogue is bad.
It is. And, the thing is, okay, you can believe it for Mark because he's a kid. And he's been reading these horror...
Agreed.
Comic books and whatnot.
Yeah.
He even has, a vampire comic book that he kind of references.
Yes.
So that, I understand. You even said it yourself. If something like this was going on around us, we'd be like, yeah, vampires.
Oh my
clearly.
God. Sorry, side note. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at things at the same time. Apparently, Salem's Lot has had 2 television adaptations. There's one from 1979.
Okay.
And there's also one from 2004 with Rob Lowe in it. I want to watch it.
We are watching that.
Oh, we're going to watch that.
Anyway, as I was saying, but it's the teacher that I have a hard time believing that he would just kind of take all this information and be like, yeah, vampires.
And be able to regurgitate that.
Right, because he doesn't give any indication of being the type of person who's like into this.
He's like a little bit jaded, a little bit like, all right, I'm going to be the only teacher crusty, who does anything around here.
Kind of ready for retirement was the feel I was getting from him. And there was no like Mark showing up being like, here's my stake, here's my vampire comic, I'm going to prove to you that this works. It was like they both figured it out on their own and then they were going to come together and work together. It just... I didn't like it.
I agree with you. I feel it's just like, we're going to make this as easy as possible because we're lazy writers and we can't be bothered to. That was what it felt like. And I don't know if it was like the direction. I don't know if it was production that did this, because I never want to blame like one specific person or whatever. I never want, like, look, I'm saying that like the dialogue was very ham-fisted and whatever, but I also am aware of like what writers in spaces, I think we all are, especially now after like the writer's strike that occurred and everything, we're kind of aware of what writers in Hollywood have to deal with on a regular basis. And so I don't want to like sit and be like, oh, it's the writers that are shit. No. Do you know how many approvals things like this have to go through before they actually get to the point where they're filming?
Well, yeah, because somebody's got to fork out some money for this thing, right?
Exactly. That's it. So yeah, it was just, oh gosh, I don't know. It was just
an exposition dump.
It was an exposition dump that's like, oh, and here's how we have to do it. And also, so I will say that, like, so Ben's character and Susan, who's one of the women that he meets when he arrives in town, they do have a romantic connection in the novel as well. And this happens in the film also. But surprise, surprise, in the novel, it feels a lot more genuine and not like, oh, we just put it here because it's in the book, which is really how the movie felt to me.
Yeah, because these characters had no chemistry. And they knew each other for like 5 minutes.
Yes.
And now we're led to believe that Ben would give up his entire life for this woman.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's it. So, like, Susan's character is attacked and turned at some point towards the end, and he does wind up having to kill her. But he has, like, quite the existential crisis about it first. And I'm like, you've been here for, like, 3 weeks. Like, you guys have known each other for 10 seconds. Calm down.
This is it. And, like, again, okay, fine. If I were to be put in a position where I would have to kill anybody.
Yes, it would be horrible.
It would be horrible. But, like, the way that they were portraying it was like this was like his soulmate.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah. No, I know what you mean. It's true. It did kind of feel like that.
And they kept coming back to it, and I kept being like, okay. Like,
yeah, that's it. I found one of the, unfortunately, again, also, the movie really liked to... The movie did a lot of changing in terms of the fates of the characters is something that changed quite a bit from the novel and the original like material because Stephen King doesn't tend to stick to like everybody dies in the same way in this book. He doesn't really do that very often. So, you're watching the movie and you're like, yes, everybody gets attacked by the vampires and everyone dies because of the vampires, or they get turned and then they have to, change. Whereas in the novel, let's see, Matt, the professor, the teacher at the school, he has a heart attack.
Yes.
In the middle of one of the attacks that's happening, he literally has a heart attack and dies.
So that's not what happens in the movie.
No, that's it. Dr. Cody, who's the doctor in town, they did a gender swap in this one because she's a female character played by Alfre Woodard. She doesn't get in the movie she gets shot. And in the book, I believe that she also gets like turned by either by Barlow or something like that, or she's killed by him anyway. Right. Oh, gosh, who else? What else was different? In the novel, there's a priest character named Father Callahan in both the book and in the film. And he struggles with like substance abuse issues. Right. He has an alcohol addiction and things like that. And the whole thing with him, obviously, is that it's like he's lost his faith, sort of, because of his own personal struggles that he's experiencing and everything. And so in the film, he yet again is one of the horde of people who is attacked and killed by Barlow. However, in the novel, I believe Father Callahan survives, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, okay, that's it. So technically, Callahan hasn't had enough faith in the novel. He hasn't had enough faith to actually be able to kill Barlow or to use anything against him. So Barlow forces Callahan to drink his blood, which makes him unclean, and then he's not able to re-enter his own church
Oh, interesting.
And so he's defeated and he leaves town, but he doesn't die.
Interesting.
So it's more of a question of, like, again, sort of like one's faith.
Well, you see, they do this for like a second in the movie.
Gosh.
Because, okay, so there's this whole thing in the movie where if you have a cross and you show it to a vampire, and it glows.
It glows.
And then it, like, repels said vampire.
Indeed.
But what happens with Father Callahan is he's holding up a cross in front of Barlow, and the cross just goes dark.
Yeah.
It stops glowing. And Barlow says to him something like, you know, it's terrible when our faith leaves us, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, interesting. So, like, there's kind of a facet here where you have to be a believer.
Yes, but then they don't get more of a chance to explore it because
then
he's
he
then
rips
killed.
his face off.
Yeah, he's killed right after that. So you're like, okay.
And then it's like, so am I supposed to believe that all these people are like devout Christians? Maybe.
I don't. I mean, like, granted, like, I get it. It does have like a small town vibe to it, so I could understand that were more if that were more the case.
Especially in the 70s.
Yeah, that's it. And look, like, that's it. You know, the whole thing that happens is, yes, that basically slowly but surely everyone in town disappears because they are slowly being captured and either killed or turned. And so by the end, essentially, that's it. You're left with, by the end, you're left with Ben and Mark, who, yes, they are able to kill Barlow, who, like, I will say, he looked pretty good. There was a little bit too many CGI enhancements on him, because when he doesn't have it, he actually looks pretty good. Like, the makeup looked pretty good.
Yeah, the makeup was good.
Yeah.
They went a little far with the glowing and
on the
stuff.
actor, but yeah, they gave him like a few too many, like, maybe CGI enhancements, so it takes you out of it a little bit while you're watching. You're like, ooh, okay. So they are able to defeat Barlow, and then the way that everything works is that's it, because Ben and Mark kill him. All of the people in town who have been turned are now kind of directionless because they have no leader.
Right.
So Ben and Mark have to, like, escape by the skin of their teeth, essentially, out of town. And what is it? Yes, Ben returns the following day, and he does pick up the bodies of Mark's parents, who we don't really, again, see very much of in the novel. They're killed, so he no longer has parents.
Right.
And he also picks up the body of the doctor, who also is not killed by she is killed by vampires, or he is killed by vampires, I guess, in the book. But it's like a rigged trap with a bunch of knives that he, like, falls onto. So again, it's not your straightforward, everybody's just attacked. And yeah, I know. It was like Home Alone. It's crazy. Yeah,
that would have been interesting.
I know, I thought so too. Anyway, so he returns to get their bodies, and he buries them to give them, like, a proper, you know, funeral and whatever. And the thing is that the way that the novel's set up, in the prologue, you're actually getting an after look. So even before the story starts, because what happens in the prologue is that it's been like a period of time, like probably like a year or something, since the end of the novel, of like what happened in the story.
Right.
Ben and Mark had taken off.
Okay.
And sought asylum. I'm pretty sure they go to Mexico. Yeah, they take us because they want to get as far away as possible.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they take a flight to Mexico or anything, and they attempt to, like, recover from everything. Mark
on the beach.
Mark is able to be, like, sort of semi-adopted by, like, some priests in the Catholic Church to, like, help him kind of, because he's a child. He's like 9 or 10 years old. He's a baby.
He's 11 3/4 in the movie.
Exactly. And then in the epilogue, that's it. It's the two of them 1 year later. They go back because they know that there are still a fuck ton of vampires in town. They didn't kill everybody while they were there. And they know they're not going to be able to just do it.
Right.
Basically, they're not going to just, like, walk into town. So essentially what they do is that they set this massive brush fire in the woods right outside of town, because they just want to burn the whole thing to the ground, which is so funny because we were saying the entire movie, we're like, burn the house down, burn the town down,
burn it all down, burn it all down.
Yeah.
But, I think in the movie, if I'm not mistaken, there's a bit of a glimpse of, not as elaborate as that, but Mark comes back the day after his parents and Father Callahan are killed in their house, and he puts, like, sheets on them and flowers.
Yes, he does. Yeah. Yes, that's the only kind of thing that you do get for that, and that's fine. Like, that wouldn't have to be any different necessarily, but there's no, I don't remember in the movie there being any other kind of resolution, in the sense that they kill Barlow, and then they drive out of town, and that's it, and then cut to credits, and that's it, we're done. And I was like, what about all of the other vampires? Because you're talking hundreds of people potentially have been turned.
Well, like, this was my question, because they show it in the movie that they go to the drive-in movie theater or whatever, and all the vampires are in the trunks of the cars, so they're coffins, they're not cars, right?
Gosh, yeah, that was also a really bad line. Anyway.
Yeah, and I kind of thought that visually that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, yeah, all right, I'm here for it. But they only showed like a few of them getting set on fire.
Agreed.
They went into the sun and they got out of the trunks.
Again, several of them did, but if the population of this town is 1,200 people, and we're saying basically everyone has disappeared, and Mark and Ben are the last two people in town.
Yeah.
There were, like, 30, 40 people in that drive-in, Like, where the fuck are the rest of the people?
Well, didn't Mark say at one point, if you kill Barlow, then you kill all of them?
I don't think so.
Yeah, he says it.
Does he?
Very quickly.
So they just wrap it up like that then.
Very, very quickly. When he's flipping through his comic book, when he's realized that it's a vampire.
Yes.
He's like, okay, so if I kill Barlow, I kill all of them? Or unless it was just written on his piece of paper.
It might have been. I don't know.
It was very subtle. There was it was, for a movie with so much exposition dump.
They don't explain things.
Yeah.
In certain cases very well. No,
it was really odd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just, it was just very lackluster. It didn't really feel set in the time period that it's set in, and there was just a lot of choppy exposition that felt unnatural
and confusion on tone.
Agreed. Yes, the whole way through. So yeah, it's too bad. Like, I walked away from it and I was just like, wow, that was disappointing. I was very disappointed.
Yeah,
I really wanted a little bit more, because you can tell there was thought put into all of the visual aspects of things.
Yeah, it was very nice visually.
It was.
Yeah.
There were some really fucking great shots in the film, just in general at different times, but that's it. And it just since the tone flip-flopped so much, it never built a scare to a point where I was like, ooh, like, that was really good.
Yeah.
That was really, like, creepy. Like, that actually worked. Like, it didn't do anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of it, like, the boys were satisfied because they were like, yeah, it was a movie. And then...
But that is kind of what it was. It was a movie.
It was a movie.
Yeah.
And we watched it and we stayed engaged, I guess, the whole way
it's
through.
not like I wouldn't say it was like the most boring movie I've ever seen in my life. Oh my god, it's a piece of shit. Like, the internet likes to exaggerate about these things. Every time people always like shit all over new releases and they're like, that was the worst fucking movie I've ever seen in my life. If this is the worst movie you've ever seen in your life, I don't think you've watched very many movies.
You need to go watch The Velocipaster.
Yeah, just a lot of I mean, like, come on. Like, right? Like, come on, guys. Anyway, but so I think that people like to exaggerate. However, I will say that overall it's a very kind of lackluster film. Maybe watch it for some of like the visual aspects of it. Like I said, like, the costumes are pretty good.
Movie,
yeah, that's it. Tis the season for it. So sure, if you want to have a little vampire or something or other, cool.
Like, I wouldn't say skip it entirely. It's fine. It's something to watch.
It almost makes it hard to talk about because it's fine. Like, it's not so bad that you can shout about it, but it's not so
exactly
good
what
either.
It is. Like, it's like, it's fine. Like, it's, I'm not a horror movie buff. I was fine.
Yeah.
Exactly. It was fine.
For some people, it'll be good probably because of like the lack of certain kind of creepy atmosphere and scares. So for people who are very skittish, like, it'll be a pretty easy movie to watch, I would say.
Totes.
Anyway, I would love to know if you guys have watched it, if you have any thoughts about it, if you've maybe did you go on like Shireen, you didn't really know anything about it, and you'd also never read the book, so you didn't have like anything to base it off of, or have you read the book and seen all of the previous adaptations, and like, how do you feel that this one kind of falls into that canon in terms of like in its place? Anyway, you can let us know about that over on Instagram, TikTok, or Threads at fullybookedca, and also feel free to head over to fullybookedca.newsletter and sign up for our newsletter so that you can get all of the new information coming in. But until next week, guys, keep on reading.
Thanks, everyone.